Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to EFL Debate Championship podcast. It looks a bit misty, doesn't it? I don't quite know. I'm in the usual place. Not quite sure what's happened there, but anyway, we'll go with it. Talking about the top talents in the championship, I think it's a fantastic league for developing players. In terms of, I think in terms of it's a very high level of football. In contrast with other top European leagues, I think it compares very favourably the Championship, but also the fact that it's one division down from the Premier League means it's the perfect breathing ground for the stars of tomorrow, and I think that's what we're seeing at the moment. So, in this special episode, we're talking about the top young talents across the Championship and who has the greatest potential. And we might even be able to come up with a ranking of the top 10 between us, depending on how things go. So, welcome along to this Championship podcast. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. You can get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. That would help us out an awful lot if you enjoy these episodes. For now, I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Ollie Mann from the Sheffield United way. Ollie, it's a really exciting league, isn't it, for top young talent, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an insane league, to be honest, but also we've seen it so much over the last few years. We talk about it a lot, but I think what really drives it home is when you look at things like an England squad and you start saying, well, they came through at Sheffield United. They came through in the Championship. They're currently playing in the Championship. The EFL is a breeding ground for the future England stars. Even just look at currently one of the best players in the world, Jude Bellingham, comes from the Championship. That's where he had his breakout. That's where he first started. And I think we've got some real stars playing in the Championship at the minute. Some people who are going to go right to the top of the game. So yeah, it's an exciting one, I think. When you get to talk, there's no negatives. There's no arguing about who's going to come fifth and who's going to get relegated. It's just excitement about some fantastic young footballers who have got, a long way to go in football.
And including Chris Basham, when you said top players in the world, I thought you were referring to him.
Yeah,
he's back.
Very clearly. Yeah, think back, he joined us, League One, free transfer, went on to be the greatest right-sided centre-half of all time, better than any of his peers. And that's what I mean. The EFL brings through these kind of players like Chris Basham, who redefine what it means to play right-sided centre-half.
Absolutely. So I wanted to talk to you, Ollie, about some of the current talents at Sheffield United. Starting obviously with Sidney Peck, put in a glorious performance, Sydney at Hillsborough, and it was big shoes to fill when Ollie Arblaster got injured, but he stepped up to the mantle beautifully.
Yeah, well, at the start of the season, if you'd told me, you'd have said to me, next March, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about the top talents in the Championship, the top young players, who's going to be United's standout. Well, clearly to me, Ollie Arblaster was the answer to that question. He was going to be the player who stepped into United's team, who was going to drive us forwards, an exciting midfield talent, capable of winning his tackles, driving a team forward, playing on the front foot, as well as being defensively solid. But he does his ACL in sort of September, October time. He's out for the season. And suddenly we have this next star off the rank, Sidney Peck. He has had a fantastic season. He has been absolutely outstanding. I think nobody expected it. That's the thing that stands out to me more than anything else. Absolutely nobody saw this coming from him because I think before this had played a grand total of about 20 minutes of professional football. He wasn't playing in the Carabao Cup. He wasn't coming off the bench. He was just somebody who'd been playing well in the under-21s who we thought might have a big future, but we'd seen nothing of him. He was due to go out on loan to Rotherham. And I thought the story might be that he has a good season on loan in League One and then we see what he's like. But he was forced into a situation that nobody expected and he has just flourished. He's done everything that I said about Ollie Arblaster is true now for Sidney Peck. He's somebody who is almost a 6.5 is the way I'm going to refer to him, in that his defensive duty is so important. You know, he's playing alongside Vinny Souza, which does help. But the way that he's constantly harrying, his energy levels in that centre of midfield are crucial to the way that United play. I have no doubt that we would not be in second place if we didn't have Sidney Peck. That's how impactful and effective he's been for us so far this season. And I think the fact that, you know, somebody who we thought might be on the bench every now and again has played more than 2,000 minutes this season is a testament to how quickly he's developed. And for me, well, we'll get into lots of other players, I'm sure, but I don't think there's any who I'm going to back to go higher in the game than Sidney Peck, because I really think he's going to be a top talent who really could go as far as he wants to, as long as he keeps his feet on the ground.
What are we talking then, Ollie?
Well, you know, he's a London lad. He joined the United Academy from Arsenal, I believe, when he'd sort of been there as a youngster. I think he'll have, well, after this season, unless if United get promoted, I think the rest of Sidney Peck's career is in the Premier League. And I think he goes up and up and up every single time. I think everybody needs a midfielder of his profile. The only thing that could potentially hold him back is his size. He's not, at the moment, a really physically dominant central midfielder. He's a talented player. He does win more than his fair share of headers. He doesn't often get brushed off the ball, but he needs to bulk up just a little bit, I think, before he truly realises his potential. But I do think he'll find himself playing in, well, it's not quite the big six anymore, is it? But I think he'll play for a top 8 team in the Premier League for the majority of his career, because I just think he's got everything you want. The only thing he's missing from his game is he cannot shoot. He just cannot shoot. It's basically a pass to the keeper whenever he tries. If he can fix that, then who knows? Maybe he'll be partnering Jude Bellingham in that central midfield for Real Madrid before too long.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we were talking about Adam Wharton, you know, in similar terms at Blackburn, 2 or 3 years ago. So you never know how that's going. I think
that's a perfect comparison. I think there's every chance that Sidney Peck could make that kind of jump. Obviously, Freeman's left Palace now, so maybe their EFL recruitment isn't going to continue the way it has done in the past. But he's certainly the profile of player who I think would flourish in that kind of environment with that level of move for his next one. Cement yourself in the Premier League and then make that sort of platform jump to being a real star.
Absolutely. Well, I think a great place to start when it comes to top talents across the EFL or across the Championship even is probably Sunderland, because they've got Chris Rigg, Joe Bellingham and Elisa Mayenda, who have been the real stars. But you could equally put in Romain Mundle and Tommy Watson, who have both had brilliant spells out on the left wing for Sunderland. But those three that I mentioned, Johnny, our friend of the podcast from the Roker Report, here's what he had to say about the Magic Trio.
Hi Gab, Johnny here. So talking about Chris Rigg, Joe Bellingham and Elisa Mayenda, I mean, the three of them have been fantastic this season. As I'm sure the vast majority of Championship watchers are aware. Chris Rigg, if we start with him, I mean, the number of minutes that he's played this season at Championship level at the age of 17, it's phenomenal, really. You know, it speaks volumes of how highly thought of he is. In terms of attributes, like his best kind of qualities, he's at his best when he's able to, almost in a Frank Lampard kind of way, when he can arrive a bit late into the danger area. You saw that with his goal against Middlesbrough earlier on in the season at Stadium of Light. You know, that was getting in late, sniffing out the danger, knowing where to be in the box and then capitalising with a little bit of quality to top it off. I think that sums him up. Don't get me wrong, he's brilliant deeper as well. He's excellent on the ball, really, really aware player. You know, he knows what's going on. But yeah, I think for me, he's at his best when he's able to push on and attack the space. And he'll go very far. Joe Bellingham. You know, I think with Rigg and Joe, you're talking about two players with very similar ceilings. I'd be shocked if both of them don't go on to play for the senior England side. Job, I think we know a bit more what we're going to get from him. You know, he's a little older than Rigg, a bit more established. But this season, I think he's really come into his own in a deeper role. Not at the base of the midfield, but able to get on the ball much earlier in transition and drive forward with the ball at his feet. I think Job's possibly most underrated quality for me is his ability to seemingly almost reach out and just scoop the ball with him from anywhere on the pitch. He can use that ability to win the ball back from somebody, just scoop a leg around and nick the ball, but he's equally adept at using that ability to kind of, drag the ball with him as he starts off on a run. And, he takes players out of the game. Sometimes he'll take 2 or 3 players out of the game with one movement, which is just fantastic. And Elijah Mayenda, he's not started as many games as the other 2. And in my opinion, I think his ceiling's a little bit lower. But I think it's fair to say that Mayenda's come on leaps and bounds this season. From the kid who couldn't get a sniff on loan at Hibs last season, to being, I think he might be our highest goal contributor this season. But certainly he's got 11 or 12 goal contributions this season in far fewer starts than most of his colleagues. So another one with a really, really bright future, I think, Mayenda. He's a very clever player again as well. He's a real thorn in defenders' sides. His movement's great, physical boy. Just 3 supremely talented players. But I think if we're looking at potential and where they could go in the game in the future, I think you're looking at Rigg and Job as reaching that very top level. Mayenda, I don't see him being the same level, but I'd be delighted to be proven wrong, whether it's at Sunderland or whether we, Rigg in a hefty fee and he shows it elsewhere. But yeah, three really talented boys.
So big praise there from Johnny. Thanks for following him at Hawley Johnny and Reg Report, of course. Ollie, which of those 3 have kind of stood out to you in the games against Sheffield United?
I mean, in the games against United, I think Mayenda definitely taught us a bit of a lesson when we played them. Obviously, Isidore gets a lot of the plaudits because obviously he's a fantastic footballer. He does all the work, but you don't realise that running and the sort of extra creativity that Mayenda brings, as well as the difficulties that he's always asking questions. His end product, I think, he's done really well in terms of his goal contributions, but I still think there's something a little bit more. Sometimes he finds himself in fantastic positions and doesn't think there's a real talent in there. But I do think, even though they maybe haven't showed it to the same level in the games against United, I still cannot get over the fact that Chris Rigg is 17 years old. Every time I hear it, I go, nah, he's 21. And then someone's like, no, he's 17. He's 21, and I will have nothing else about it, because it's insane to be doing what he is doing at his age, And if we think about his career so far, when he was first making his breakthrough at 16 last year for Sunderland, he was a striker. He was a centre forward that was like, oh, they've got this really exciting young striker talent. All of a sudden, we've seen him play on the left wing. We've seen him play central midfield. We've seen him control games of football in the Championship in his second position at centre mid. That's unheard of. And so, yeah, Chris Rigg is such an exciting talent. And obviously, at that age, it's hard to know quite what his trajectory looks like, but it's hard to think that he doesn't end up again another player who you can see going right to the very top, because doing what he's doing at 17, but by the time he is 21, he's going to be hard to stop.
I also wanted to completely agree on Chris Rigg. I think he's a phenomenal talent with potential to go right to the top, and that sort of range of positions that he's played in is going to be a big feather in his cap when it comes to maybe later in the game, and that universality that clubs want at the top level. What I love about Jobe Bellingham is how I think it's difficult for young men when their brother's doing extremely well in something, and then you've got to focus on your own thing, and you might not be at the same stage, but to be able to kind of separate himself from his brother and say, I'm my own person, I don't want to be compared with my brother, and Jobe rather than Bellingham, I think is really powerful. But at the same time, there's this feeling that his brother's always, trying to get to games and watching him and supporting him, and I think that's a really nice thing as well. So I think that tells a lot about the character of both brothers involved, really.
It really does, and I think as well that will set him up in such good stead, because it also seems as though their parents are really sort of involved, but also really effective in the way that they're supporting both brothers to develop their career. And I think huge credit has to go to them for all the work that they've done, supporting them both to make their own way in the game. For me, the thing with Jobe is, I think originally leaving Birmingham was a great move for him. I think, getting away from those sort of connections to his brother. Being able to be his own man, establishing his own career at Sunderland was a great move for him at the time that he made it. I think last season he had a bit of a difficult end to the season. I think maybe he'd had more minutes than he was expecting. He'd been a bigger part of the Sunderland team than he'd expected that early. And so I think maybe he was still sort of finding himself as a professional player. But the way he's performed this season is ridiculous. Like, he's another one of these players where you just can't quite believe that he's 19 years old. And it's his physical presence more than anything else that really makes Jobe stand out to me, because we talk about Premier League footballers. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. Obviously, as a United fan, I've seen us play in the Championship and be a really good team. And then I've seen us play in the Premier League and be rubbish. And so I'm trying to think about what the differences are.
You've also seen you be rubbish in League One, losing 3-1 at Southend.
I've definitely seen us be bloody rubbish in League One, I'll tell you that. But for me, Jobe is one of those players who can make that step, who will be able to be, because of his physical profile. Right now, he could go and play in central midfield in the Premier League, and he's got the right attributes, the right talent to just immediately step into a team at that level. For Chris Rigg, maybe he's got some physical development. Maybe he's got ways to go. For Sidney Peck, I said myself, physical development in terms of bulking up, making sure that he's physically ready for that competition. Jobe is already there. And so, yeah, if he can keep his, not get too carried away. If the media can also not get too carried away, because obviously we know how that can affect particularly players in England, particularly when they've got obviously famous siblings or other people who are going to be trying to big him up and maybe fast track his development before he's ready. But it looks as though he's got everything right. He's got everything about him so far, both sort of from that mental side of the game and from the sort of way he's playing on the pitch. What a player. I mean, I love them all, Gab. This is what I said at the start. Right about everybody.
Absolutely. You don't have to choose between them. We can just love them all. Next top talent is Ben Doak of Middlesbrough. He spent a month or two out on the sidelines, but he's still a phenomenal prospect and could have a big future at Ashford.
They're all so good.
Hello, Gab. Johnny here from the Ball Breakdown podcast, here to give you a bit of a review on Ben Doak this season and where I think he might go in his career. And, well, what do I think of Ben Doak? What is his strengths? I think he's a very good ball carrier. I think he's good at dribbling and getting past his man, getting the ball in the box. And what I would say is that he makes things happen. Now, it might not be the most perfect ball in the box, but sometimes you can get something from that cross, whether it's a deflection, whether it's a position where the ball might fall to the striker's feet. And that in itself is as good as getting a ball perfectly to the striker and creating a goal, really. So I think he has a lot of strengths, like I alluded to there. His dribbling, I think, is definitely improving, the way he beats his man, the way that he's very direct and can make things happen. But he's still a player that is incredibly raw, right? He's not had too many minutes in senior men's football. The injury now that he's got to the end of the season restricts that further. So that rawness that he has will probably come into the next season and then maybe the season after as well. So he will have to tighten things up and become better. But wow, is he exciting, He's definitely got his name on a lot of lips in the footballing world. And his ceiling, well, it's an interesting one, because is he going to eclipse the likes of Salah? Absolutely not. I think a fantastic comparison for Ben Doak is probably looking at Harvey Elliott. I think he is probably another level of Harvey Elliott, where I think would definitely get into a Liverpool team or a top 6 team and be a consistent starter. And that in itself is a fantastic achievement and a really high level player. But he's not going to be that elite player that you do see at the top of the Premier League. And the reason why I say that, I just think that he hasn't really fully set the world. Like when I'm looking at the likes of Morgan Rogers, for example, you could always see that ability to carry the ball a lot stronger, the arrogance, the touch, the quality was always there. With Ben Doak, I just don't really see it just yet. I still think that there's a fantastic player there. I just don't think that he's going to be an elite talent that would go for hundreds of millions of pounds, maybe a £50 million player, which isn't a bad thing at all in the future. But yeah, overall, really good player. High potential, really promising, very direct, but a player who I think is probably another Harvey Elliott.
Sounds similar to your review of Sidney Peck, not in terms of playing styles, but just in terms of, where I guess Johnny from the Borough Breakdown thinks he's at.
Yeah, completely. And I really enjoyed maybe just a £50 million player. He's only going to be around that £50 million mark, not be that good.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish I could be that bad. If I could be bad enough to only be worth 50 million.
The EFL debate company's only worth £50 million,
Okay,
Ollie.
that's all we're getting, Gab. What a shame.
Yeah.
Oh, no. No, I think it's really interesting, though, that kind of reflection on Ben Doak and sort of where he's at so far. Because obviously there were big rumours in January that he'd be leaving Middlesbrough and that he would already be making that jump to one of the teams in the Premier League. I think he was rumoured, was it Crystal Palace who were rumoured to be in for him before they picked up Roman Essa? And so you can really see that his name is out there. He's making an impression. And clubs are starting to take notice of the work that he's been doing, the work that he was doing earlier in this season at Middlesbrough. I think it's a real shame about his injury because I do think he's a player who needs a full season's development at championship level. I think you can really see the difference between players who get to sort of 20 games. I think he's played around the 20, 25 mark. And the players who play 50, 70, a real full season behind him would be great to see. For me, the big thing with Doak is I think he suits Middlesbrough quite a lot in the way that they play, in the way that they were front-footed, the way that they definitely try and get their wingers high. They want him isolated one-on-one with a wing-back to really try and beat his man. I think that ball-carrying ability stands out in that team. I think for me, what would be a great next move for him, I'd want to see him back in the Championship next season, another loan, get the full season's development in. But in the Premier League, if he's going to go to the Premier League, I think he wants to be in maybe sort of a bottom 6, bottom 7 team, not one of the relegation, so not a promoted team, because I just don't think there's any point in terms of development for young players at this stage. It just feels like it defeats the point. But maybe one of those teams just outside, somebody who's not going to have loads of the ball, but who really want you to be stretching the defenders. They want an out ball where they can knock it in behind, get you running, get you isolated, get you to stand up your man. Because I think that feels like the best way to really see what his level's going to be. I think the Harvey Elliott comparison is really interesting, but I see a lot more sort of technical finishing ability from Harvey Elliott. The way he always stood out in terms of, say, dead ball ability, or the way that he could strike a ball. I think that's where it's going to be slightly different profile. And actually, if he gets it right, Doak is the kind of player that every team wants. Because if you can get a fast, direct, tricky winger who can beat his man and get a ball in the box every time, that is just a license to print money. Because that is everything that you need to be successful in football. He just really figure himself out. Oh, come on. I think, though, as well, again, another one where it's that physical side. I'm looking at some of his stats from this season, and he factors, is in the top 15% of players for chances created. That is insane when you're down there. I think it's his first loan, and he's really starting to stand out. But aerial duels, 6%. So that's the other thing that a winger of his profile you probably want to see more of. You want to see him arriving at the back post, really challenging his fullback, trying to get on top of his fullback to be competing, be another body in the box. And so I think there's aspects of his game to work on, but I think he's another very talented player. But I'd like to see him, where we talk about Jobe, Rigg, Peck, I think all of those are Premier League players that are ready to step. For me, Doak, I want to see another season from him in the Championship to really cement the progress. I think his injury really derailed that.
Yeah, that's a fair argument. I think there's part of me that feels like he's already Championship proven and he's kind of already bought that badge. But I also kind of understand what you mean in the sense that going into the Premier League, having not had much match practice out for the season, it would feel it might be a bit much. So I can understand the logic for that. But definitely a top-end Championship.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I talk about him being in the Championship, I mean probably somebody like Southampton. Somebody who need a different option down the wing because they're going to have, say they play possession football, they're really slow. You want somebody who can speed it up, get it out to the wing. I think a real top Championship team would be better than a bottom-end Premier League team immediately for him because you want to get his confidence up. What you don't want is him to be in a team that loses every week, his confidence to go, and then that really affects the rest of his career. I don't like to harp on about him, but let's say Ryan Brewster, for example. He was probably at a similar stage after his Swansea loan. Really impressive loan in the Championship. He's proven he's better than that. He's a top talent. He needs to go somewhere. Well, his next move was to the worst team in the Premier League, where he couldn't score any goals, didn't get any chances, and it disrupted his entire development. Doak wants to be at a top Championship team, keeping his confidence high, really attacking teams and showing what he can do.
I'm a big believer, both in managerial careers and in footballing careers, that the momentum of your career is actually more important than the level you're at right now. So the chances of success, the probability of success, go for that move. Don't go just to say that you're a Premier League player or a Premier League manager. Right, Ollie, you might have to hold your nose now because we're talking to James Mappin from Wednesday Till I Die.
Hi, it's James from the Wednesday Till I Die podcast, just talking to you about James Beadle, Shea Charles and Jeddy Gassama, three of the youngsters at Sheffield Wednesday this season. Starting off with James Beadle, on loan from Brighton. We signed him on loan back in January last season. He signed for the full season this time around, again on loan. Fantastic goalkeeper. His shot-stopping ability is second to none. Some of the saves he pulls off are quite incredible, really. I think he's been a little bit let down by his defence this season. The guys in front of him haven't given him much support, if I'm being totally honest. When you look at his shot save percentage, it is pretty low, but I don't think that tells the true story, to be honest. Had a bit of a wobble. You'll have all seen the mishap against Coventry, dropping the ball last minute, losing the game 2-1. And I do think that's dented his confidence a little bit, if I'm being honest. Coming out for crosses is not too great, but do you know what? He does everything else that a modern goalkeeper would do. Passing out from the back, he's very, very comfortable at. It doesn't faze him at all. Having his ball at the feet, more than comfortable at doing that as well. But yeah, I think he'll go far. He's already in the England setup, in the England under-21s. He's played the past couple of games. Didn't have a great game against France, but, end of the day, goalkeepers do have some of those games sometimes. I think if he can sort out his, commanding of the box, coming for crosses, if he can get better at that, then there's no reason why he can't go on to bigger and better things and perhaps even play for the England first team as well. Now, in terms of Shea Charles, this guy, I mean, I know it's a big claim to make, and I know the bar's not set very high either, but probably the best player to play for Sheffield Wednesday since coming out of the Premier League, and that's 25 years ago now. He's cool, calm, collected. Time seems to go like stand still when he gets the ball, in that holding midfielder role. Doesn't shy away from a tackle. You see that with the amount of yellow cards that he's picked up this season, 9 so far. I know that's nothing to brag about, but again, he knows what he needs to do at the right time. For all those yellow cards he's got, he's made so many more fantastic tackles. I mean, if you had a little criticism, perhaps not too much in terms of creativity, but again, he's playing in that holding midfielder role. You don't really expect that from someone like him. Yeah, he's got to go far. I'm not quite prepared for him going back to Southampton and then facing Southampton next season, if I'm honest. He's done everything he needs to do. First name on the team sheet. Incredible footballer. Already in the Northern Ireland national side, already captain him as well. So, yeah, he would, I think, is he ready for the Premier League at the moment? Not too sure. I think, better players around him obviously makes the player look better. I think, a team like a Fulham or someone like that, or a Brentford, it would certainly look to slot in. But I think a good season next season with Southampton, and he'll be more than ready. And the final player is Jeddy Gassama. He's one that signed at the start of last season, so he's a Xisco Munoz signing. But Danny Röhl has just taken him from to a different level, to be honest. He's clearly worked in the summer of this last season. He worked on his strength, and you can see that now. Challenges just bouncing off him. He does still need to learn when to pass the ball, and his final output isn't always excellent, but he's one of those players that gets you off the edge of your seat, and that's exactly what you want as a fan. And he is 100% that player. He can run down the wing, he can take a man on, and he's got pace to burn as well. We saw a few times already this season, knocking the ball past the player and running onto it, and seems really effective at doing that. You see other players, leaving, in the January transfer window, going for some decent money, upwards of 10 million. Do you know what? I know people are probably going to raise our eyebrows a little bit at this one, but I think Jedi Gassama is potentially that player. You know, the only problem is his contract is up at the end of next season, so we really need to tie him down to a long contract. But it wouldn't shock me if he did leave in the summer and at least went to a top championship club, maybe even a bottom end Premier League club at the end of this season. You know, great player, really exciting, and certainly one to watch.
Absolutely. Get subscribed to the Wednesday Till I Die podcast with James Mappin. Ollie, which of those three, Shay Charles and JD Gassama and James Beadle, were the ones that sort of impressed you in the Still City derby?
Nah, they were all rubbish, Gav. No, I think it's Jedi Gassama who really does stand out as one of those talents who you see really going far. You know, we talked about it very similarly with Ben Doak in terms of where he's at, in terms of his development. He's one of these wingers who can really stand up his man, can beat you 1-to-1, he can get around you. He's got pace to burn, so it's so effective in really scaring a defender. The last thing you want as a fullback is a fast, tricky player running at you. And that's what Gassama is fantastic at. You know, looking at some of his stats as well, the thing that jumps out to me more than anything else, he's in the top 56% of wingers in terms of the defensive ability. Now, that is not something that anybody starts to talk about. Nobody thinks of Jedi Gassama as a man who's going to sit in and do his job. But that shows you his effectiveness in this Sheffield Wednesday system. He's their main creative force. He's getting forward, beating his man, standing out as an attacker, but he does his job, helps out his fullback, make sure they're not getting overloaded down the wings. So I think he's got a big future. And actually, I was shocked when James said that he'd only got 1 year left on his contract after this season, because I assumed he was tied down a bit longer, because he does seem like a real talent that could fetch good money for Wednesday, a team who don't historically sell well. And I did think that he might be let's try a new tactic. Let's sell somebody for big money. So that is a concern. The one who's not mentioned there, though, Gab, who I did want to shout out big time was... we talked about James Beadle there in goal, but I think they've got a bigger goalkeeping talent sat on the bench in Piers Charles. I think Piers Charles is going to be a real talent. You know, he's Shay Charles' younger brother, which I think is interesting in terms of their development together in this Sheffield Wednesday team. But next season, I think he'll probably be Wednesday's number one. And I think we'll really start to see huge development in terms of that. You know, Beadle's had some of his difficulties this season. He rates quite high in the league for errors leading to goals. His save percentage is quite low. So I do think that there could be as good as Beadle is, I think there could be an even better option just waiting in the wings. So when we're having this conversation next season, I wouldn't be shocked if we're talking about Piers Charles as one of the most exciting goalkeepers in the Championship.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as he doesn't get signed on a Bosman. So I'm wondering, that joke doesn't even make sense. He's probably under contract for next season.
Doesn't make any sense. I don't know how I even got there in my head.
Just shoehorned in, mate. Right. So next up, Kellen Fisher at Norwich City has had a real breakthrough season at Carrow Road. Here's what Connor Southwell of the Pinken had to say.
Hi Gab, hi everybody, Connor here from the Pinken. I've been asked to speak a little bit about Callum Fisher, which I'm more than happy to do. One of the real success stories of Norwich City this season, right back who they signed from Bromley in actually the previous summer of last season, ahead of David Wagner's last season in charge, initially as a development signing, but did so well in pre-season, impressed so much that he was included in that squad that reached the playoffs. Didn't play too much, only started 3 times for Norwich, but this year under Johannes Oftorup has had a real breakthrough campaign. I think we can describe it as dislodging Jack Stacey, very experienced, very capable right back at this level, and someone who probably has found themselves in the right place under the right coach at the right time from a Norwich City perspective. What I've liked about Fisher this year has been his development. He started off really as being sort of an in-possession fullback who could invert, who could step into the middle of the pitch. He's played central midfield on a couple of occasions during the more extreme parts of Norwich City's first injury crisis of the season. And his ability to handle the ball, confidence to take it into areas, and technical quality, technical proficiency is outstanding, along with probably those defensive elements that want to tackle, those sort of old school elements that people love from their fullbacks. He's capable of doing all of that. And probably the major question mark as the season wore on was, could he add all of that stuff that he'd learned and developed to an attacking element of his game? Could he add that? And we've seen that as well in the last couple of weeks throughout the season, sort of previously, certainly the first half of it, when Norwich wanted to be a little bit more aggressive in their right back positioning, when they wanted to be a little bit more direct and have a little bit more of a vertical runner. They opted for Stacey over Fisher, and there was a lot of sort of swapping in and out of games because of the respective qualities of the two. Whereas what we've seen as the season has gone on is Fisher actually take on some of those attacking responsibilities, look a lot better at being aggressive, being more direct, being the fullback who makes runs beyond overlaps, underlaps, gets the ball to the byline. And what Johannes Torp wants is those low crosses. He needs to improve in terms of some of his deliveries, but the fact we're seeing him in better positions now, he's kept up a couple of assists as well. We've seen real improvement, and what we've seen from him this season has probably come from a fullback who at the start of the season looked like a really defensively solid prospect to somebody who now really feels like an all-round fullback who could really go on next season and have an outstanding campaign. He's been excellent. I'd like to see him, as I say, progress in terms of that final ball. I think there's more to come from him in terms of learning the more attacking elements of the game. But technically, in possession, the way he tackles is outstanding. It's a throwback. I think there's a lot to like about Callum Fisher. Similarly, probably to Max Aarons in some regards. I don't want to compare the two because I think they're quite different. But the size of them both maybe is perhaps something that clubs higher up the pyramid may well look at. It's probably the reason Max Aarons didn't get that move when he was at the pomp of his Norwich City career. That is obviously what Callum Fisher has to do. I do think Fisher is probably a little bit more physical than him. So, yeah, there's a little bit on Callum Fisher, a really outstanding talent and definitely one to watch.
Ollie, do you think a right back being physical is going to make a difference for them going into the Premier League and help them succeed in a way that Max Aarons, who had comparable talent, let's say, to Callum Fisher, maybe didn't quite make the grade at that level?
I do. I think it makes a real difference. I think actually that was one of the things that's really stood out to me looking at some of Callum Fisher's stats. I saw him very much as being a ball-playing fullback, as being a player who you expect to be able to pick up the ball, be really confident receiving it, be trying to sort of play on the front foot and bring his team forward. But his defensive stats actually stand out really well, particularly around those duels. And his aerial duels won percentage is really sort of much more impressive than I expected it to be. And so certainly feels like with that extra layer of physical development, he'd be ready to make the step up, because the big thing I always see or have reflected on when you get to the Premier League is that's the difference. It's the physical profile of the players you're up against. Everybody who's fast in the Championship is average in the Premier League because everybody at that top level is so much quicker, so much bigger, so much stronger. And particularly as a fullback who's going to be asked to defend his back post a lot, you can't be allowing the winger to come in on the back of you, get up behind you and dominate you to win those balls. And so I think it's going to be a really key part, because whether or not he can make the step up is all about the answer to that question. Can you get yourself to a level of physical development that you can handle those fast, strong wingers? Because I think he's got all the technical fundamentals to be a really good player, but I do think there's a question mark about how far he can go depending on how well he does develop physically. And I can understand completely how it's held players back in the past.
I often feel, though, with these young players, sometimes it can be the second season where they really shoot up. So that's what excites me about Callum Fisher, because we hadn't really spoken about him much last season. I don't know if he even featured for Norwich. And this season, he's had what you'd call a breakthrough season. So next season, I think could be a really big one for him. So that's what I'm really excited about. I think we'll rattle through a few of maybe for some of the less fancied teams, young talents that have been able to show a little bit of potential. Starting with Georgia Thieven of Bristol City.
Hey there, Gab. Georgia Thieve is a funny one, because I think for large proportions of the season, he's looked like an out-of-confidence player, a player that looked maybe a little bit out of depth at Championship level, and maybe as a consequence of this being his first loan away from West Ham, it felt like maybe he was just a little bit lost in the professional game. But ever since his brace against Middlesbrough and him being in the right position for two moments, at crucial points in the game, his confidence has gone up massively, and we saw flashes of what Georgia could do. His technical ability, his kind of dribbling, his willingness to ask for the ball. That's what really impressed me when he first came on in a Bristol shirt against Millwall and Ashton Gate in a 4-3 win, where he just demanded the ball at every opportunity. And I was like, really impressive for a youngster to come in on his debut or come off the bench and sort of expect and show that bravery. Ever since then, he showed moments of quality, but there's just so many frustrating moments with him as well. I think he's got a hell of a lot of potential, and I think he's going to be a great player in the future. And Liam Manning has said this has been a very good first loan for someone like Earthy. I just want to see a little bit more, and I want to see a little bit more, maybe goal contributions. And he got an assist away at Sheffield United, and he's started to look much more of a confident player. I just want to see a little bit more in terms of end product and a little bit more in the final third from Earthy, where he'll probably get most of his minutes from the bench for the rest of the season if there aren't many injuries. But yeah, I've liked the look of Earthy. I think there have been frustrating moments. That miss away at Oxford, for example, where we felt, right, this guy maybe might not be cut out for championship level, but he looks like a promising player. He looks like he's getting better week in, week out recently, and hopefully an asset and a really good rotational option for Bristol City until the end of the season.
So Gab has asked me to talk about our good friend Freddie Potts, what kind of player he is, what he's brought to Portsmouth, how he's played this season. So I'll go back to the beginning, further than back actually than when he signed. We lost Joe Morel over the summer through injury. We kind of released him out of contract. And what Joe brought was a lot of energy, a lot of duels being won, a good amount of ball progression through dribbles and carries, which is quite underrated. And we needed to replace that. So we looked around and we found one of the standout, in my opinion, young midfielders in League One last season, Freddie Potts for Wickham, on loan from West Ham. He came in, he didn't immediately start for whatever reason, despite the fact everyone kind of knew he should. And he finally got a start. I think it was against Burnley away. And since then, he's just been magnificent. He's struck up a really good partnership with Andre Dizelle. What he brings is he wins a lot of tackles. He's very sensible on the ball. He has a few clangers every now and again, but on the whole, he's pretty sound. Wins headers, which is important. He's got like these really ingenious little flicks and dribbles and feints he'll do that maybe you wouldn't expect from a player just looking at him. But he's quite a clever player on the ball. His issues, well, not his issues, but his areas to improve moving forward are definitely scoring goals. Like I find his shot selection and actions around the box to be a little odd. If you look at his goal at QPR away, for example, his only goal for us so far, he can do that more often, but he just doesn't really get his timing right. Sometimes he'll try and get under the ball too much and put it top corner when maybe you can drill it low and hard. But on the whole, yeah, he's been a really positive player for us. I'd love to get him back next season, but I don't know if we will, because he could honestly be a Premier League squad player next season. Obviously, he's got a lot of competition at West Ham, but yeah, on the whole, a very, very good signing and a good player for Portsmouth.
Hi there, Gab, and everyone watching or listening. I've been asked to do a little quick video about Tyler Goodrum, his form this season and kind of prospects for the future. He's had a bit of a mixed bag this season in that at the start under Des Buckingham this season in the Championship, he was probably our star player, even though he'd moved out to the wing despite playing the last bit of last season when we were promoted from League One in number 10 with Ruben Rodriguez. He managed to impact all games in all senses, not only with kind of quality attacking contributions for the wing, cutting in onto both his favoured right foot, but also playing on the right wing and scoring a few goals on his left foot as well, which we weren't used to seeing, which was also nice. But also a great degree of tactical maturity and understanding for the defensive side of the game, and in games where we tended to press a bit higher. He was very good at cutting out passing lanes and kind of leading us with that aggression. Since Gary Rowett took over, he's had his opportunities limited, as Rowett, at least on paper, has kind of tended to favour wingers who are a bit more direct. Well, I say that really only kind of Siriki Dembele and Shemi Peheta in spells have kind of had a net positive contribution from the wing for us. So as I say, that's what's seen his opportunities limited a bit. The times he has come on have been in kind of fits and starts off the bench, where he's had to kind of usually see out a game rather than kind of providing an attacking spark. But his potential is still very high, and yeah, maybe an England youth team call up soon.
There we go. Ollie, what do you, any sort of standout there? I mean, Jack Hancock from Hancock Analysis was very praising, wasn't he, of Freddie Potts? He looks like definitely a big prospect, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. It almost feels as though it'd be the right opportunity for him to leave West Ham as well in the summer. You know, when you're looking at those opportunities, he's come down to the Championship, he's moved up from League One. It just feels like the right moment. But at 21 years old, it feels like a crucial time for his career now. It's that next move. Does he think he's going to make it at West Ham, or is it time to move on and look to go somewhere else? He's a real talent. I think he's one of those players who, you know, we talked about, you've got to have the physicality to step up. Well, he's got it. He is physically ready to play in the Premier League. It's just about making sure he is sort of technically at the level, and that he's not going to have his development stifled by being sat on the bench too often, because the last thing you want for a young player who's just getting started is to spend the next 12 months sat there playing 5 minutes here, there. You want to see him grow. You want to see him really come into a team. So I think it's interesting what his next move is. Before we do switch, though, on George Earthy, really nice story, you know. So I was talking to a couple of Bristol City friends who went to the game against Sheffield Wednesday. They met the Bristol City supporter liaison officer. And one of the things they said is that so far, George Earthy's parents have been to every single game so far this season. They've not missed one. They've gone home and away. They've been there to try and see every minute that he's going to play for his squad. And so obviously a really lovely moment for them when he got 2 goals at Middlesbrough. And yeah, just really nice to see that kind of family support, and a really, really lovely story, and hopefully something that continues as he does make it big in his career.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we wish him well. So our next video contributor is Scott Worrell, who you can subscribe to on YouTube. Here's his say on Leeds United forward Matteo Joseph.
Hi guys, Gabe just asked me to do a quick video regarding Matteo Joseph, his attributes and sort of what do I expect for the future of Matteo Joseph. Now, Matteo Joseph, for anyone who doesn't know, had a fantastic pre-season at Leeds United this year, and everyone thought he was going to be our starting number 9 for the whole season, and thought he'd displace sort of Joe Perot in that position that he's playing now. And at the start of the season he did. He was playing up front for us, but he just didn't quite click for him. And right now he's missing the sort of the calmness in front of the goal and the composure to finish off chances. Although what I would say regarding Matteo Joseph is, when I looked in pre-season at what sort of aspects of the game that he has, his ability to sort of have a striker's instinct and to be able to get on the end of the crosses and to make the correct runs and stuff like that has always been there, and it still is in his game now. It's just his sort of composure, as I said, in the final third that's letting him down right now. But because of that, in terms of where I think he can go in the future, it's going to depend on if he can sort of control his head and not just smash at things and sort of take and try to take more rational judgments in the final third rather than just slicing through the ball like he's done a lot of times this season. He's obviously got to calm down. He's got to be more composed in the final third. But his attributes they're all there. He's got everything to his game. Genuinely, he holds the ball up well. He runs the challenge really well. He's quite quick as well, which is quite nice. He gives a torrid time for defenders as well. He's really busy when he plays up front, which I really like as well in a striker. So he has, as I said, he's got a lot of attributes. And for me, he's probably got every attribute you need in a striker. He's quite strong as well, which is quite nice. But he's just, as I said, at the moment for me, he's just lacking that sort of end product. And he's lacking, as I said, the main thing for him is he's lacking that bit of composure in the final third. But I do think really high ceiling player. I do think he could still become a Premier League player, but that part of his game has to change, because right now you won't even bring him on because you'd be worried that he'd miss a good number of big chances, which he has all season really. But yeah, that's my.
Hi there, Chris here from Albion Analysis Podcast. Just on Tom Fellows. First of all, in terms of Tom's attributes, I mean, clearly his best attribute is the almost unstoppable trick that he does an awful lot of the time, which is going on the outside of defenders, getting to the byline, clipping the ball back for a centre forward in the middle, or possibly a left winger coming in to meet it and win the header. Now, where that's fallen down for us this season is that player predominantly has been Josh Mazur, and when Josh Mazur has been injured, which he has been recently, Tom's form has really suffered. Tom's tried to come on the inside, drive in and shoot on his left. He hasn't looked anywhere near as comfortable on it. There's nowhere near as much end product. And I think in terms of areas for development, that's kind of where Tom needs to go. He just needs to put that bit more variety to his game. That having been said, I mean, in terms of his potential, if he was to play somewhere that always had a player in the middle that could meet his crosses, then that variety doesn't matter as much, really, because he's always able to do the thing that he's very, very good at. It's just at the moment, it's not like Adam Armstrong at 5'8" is going to be leaping like a salmon onto any of these headers. So if he was playing for a club that had the resources to have 2 or 3 Josh Mazers in their squad, then it's no problem. But we're West Bromwich Albion and we don't have that kind of resource. So where we need Tom to develop is greater variety to his game and just a little bit more consistency when the players that he enjoys playing with aren't there. He probably just needs to be able to take games by the scruff of the neck a little bit more. And you know, I think at the moment, you know, players like Darnell Furlong and Josh Maja really help Tom. And this is only, you know, not a criticism of him because he's young and I wouldn't expect him to do this yet. But as he develops, it would be nice to see him taking the impetus in games and really dominating them rather than kind of looking to other players, whether it's Darnell Furlong to find him in the right areas down the line, slipped in behind so he can use his burst of pace, or whether it's Josh Maja to be making the right runs in the middle. If he can be sort of almost driving the agenda a little bit more, that will really help him and help him become a top player, because he has a lot of the attributes to do just that.
There we go. Sorry, Scott, by the way, I think we cut him short slightly at the end by a second or two. Tom Fellows then, Ollie, what have you made of him based on what Chris has said as well? Because he seems like a very strong crosser all in terms of a bit of a throwback winger, isn't he, I suppose?
Yeah.
But maybe in whether that can be a strength in the modern game in the sense that opponents aren't always used to a winger sort of being quite as direct and hugging the touchline as he is. How do you see his career playing out?
Yeah, I think he's a fabulous footballer, and I think the way that he plays is going to come back around. I think it's the kind of thing where old school wingers, people think they're out of fashion. Oh, it's all about dribbling, turning around and passing backwards. But these things go in cycles. All it takes is a new breed of really strong, effective wingers playing that way, maybe finding the right striker. Because I think that's the big thing. And that's really what I reflected on, sort of the contribution there, is that with the right striker, Tom Fellows is going to be a fantastic footballer. With a proper number 9 who we can sort of build up a relationship with, who we can whip balls into the box for, who are going to be effective in winning the ball, he's going to get assists, create chances, be really effective. I do worry about quite exactly how he's going to fit in the new era of teams don't generally have that number 9. You know, people are asking now, there's much more emphasis on wingers to be goal scorers. And that's where I think he needs to develop his game just a little bit more consistency. And, you know, basically exactly what you said there. How does he play when his favourite attacker's not in the squad?
Could he be converted into a wing back, do you think, Ollie, later in his career?
It's always the question, isn't it? Could he be a wing back? But I think we ask that question quite a lot, and we see our wing backs sort of becoming more and more attacking, but I don't think he's got the defensive profile, or at least I haven't seen the defensive profile from him. I think if you're asking him to do the job of a wing back, which for all wingers, there's always a chance they're going to get converted, he's really got to develop, because he doesn't do, you know, we talked about Jedi Gassama earlier, and I said he's always chasing back, he's making sure his fullback isn't outnumbered, he does his sort of the dirty work. Tom Fellows does not do the dirty work in this West Brom team. He is basically just a crossing machine. He gets the ball out on the wing, he's front-footed and always trying to create chances. He doesn't do the dirty work in terms of his defending. He's not dropping in to help his fullback. So I think there's a lot of development for him to see him become a wing-back if he does do that on stepping up.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So in terms of rounding up all the talents that we've discussed so far, I mean, there's a lot to sift through. I mean, we'll start with the very best and kind of work our way through a top 10. I think so. Here, just to kind of clarify for everyone watching as much as anything, what we're doing is players 21 and under, and we're judging them on potential and not necessarily current ability. So they two quite important. I think Chris Rigg is the biggest prospect in the Championship. So can we agree on that?
I would love to go really hard for City Peck, but it's hard to argue with a 17-year-old prodigy who's playing in the top 4 and looking brilliant. I think it might be Chris Rigg.
Yeah, I think Chris Rigg. I think if he gets his next move right, and somewhere where there's a real path to regular games, then I think he can have a phenomenal career. So for me, for a second, it's probably between Joe Bellingham and Ben Doak, but you might want to make a case for City Peck.
I would indeed. I'd certainly have Peck above Ben Doak. I think I probably would be willing to back Bellingham in that sort of number 2 spot. I think Sunderland at the moment have got an unbelievable array of talent in that kind of under 21 space. I think if they can keep them together, they're going to be an unbelievable championship team next season. Of course, that's assuming they don't win the playoffs. If they win the playoffs, they've got a basis of a really strong Premier League team. I think Job has got all the attributes. And I think where I'm looking at Peck, I think his potential is very, very high. But I think Bellingham's physical profile just has him that little bit above. So I'm happy to say Bellingham number 2, but I'm having Peck above Doak every day of the week. Because I think Doak's got more development to do. I think he's got to work. He's got more work to do in terms of his physical profile. I think he's effective and catches the eye because he's an attacker. But I actually think he'd get lost in the shuffle in the Premier League as it currently stands. Whereas I think Peck would still stand out in being able to start for your Crystal Palace, your Brentford, that kind of side. He could really be the sort of heart of that team.
Yeah, okay. I'm willing to compromise on that, Ollie. I think I would probably make the argument, though, that I think there's an element of recency bias here where, that
Huge.
form that
I'm also wearing red and white glasses.
Of course. There's a bit of red and white bias as well. But also, like that form certainly around November-ish time, around the run up to Christmas, where Ben Doak and Finn Azaz and their link-up play was absolutely glorious. And whereas Sidney Peck at the start of the season was kind of second fiddle. So I think there's an element of recency bias there.
Yeah, there is, and it comes through. But I think it's also recognising the development that Peck's made across the season. Because one of the things that stands out is, I talked before about his role in this team alongside Vinny Souza. But actually, Vinny Souza has missed 6, 7, 8 games as the season has gone on. And Peck has stepped forward to be our central midfield leader. He's played with Hamza Chowdhury, Tom Davis. He's played with Harrison Burrows for some games. He's been the central cog. And in every game where United have been effective, he's been the player that stood out. And it's actually more noticeable when you take Peck out of the team than when you take Vinny Souza out of the team at this moment in time. Because generally speaking, if you put, say, Souza and Chowdhury next to each other, we have no outlet. We can't get through midfield. We can't do transition. We can't spin teams or win the ball high because you've got 2 really deep players. Peck is the sort of player who really turns us from being defensive minded and solid to actually having a way of getting out and unlocking our creative potential. I think he does both jobs perfectly. And I do think he's a much more important player for Sheffield United than anybody realises.
Okay, so we'll compromise on Job second, of course, then Sidney Peck, then Ben Doak will have 4th. But there was big praise for Charles. It's not Pierce Charles, it's
Shay
Charles. There we go. Thank you. Shay Charles. I mean, I would probably have him in 5th spot just because of what James Mappin said there. Best player.
You also,
it's a long time since Sheffield Wednesday were in the Premier League, Ollie.
It's a very long time since Sheffield Wednesday were in the Premier League, Gab, and I love the opportunity to remind them of that. But no, Shay Charles is a fantastic footballer. We're also talking about somebody who, has come through the Man City Academy. He's been bought for £20+ million by Southampton. He's a player who, this time next season, if you said to me he's going to be Player of the Year in the Championship, I would believe you. All day long, playing in a dominant team who's going to be at the top of this division, he's going to take even more steps forward. So I think there's probably quite a gap between this top 5 and the ones below. Because I think if you told me these 5 in the next 10 years play for top 6 teams, I would believe you. Whereas I think everybody else, we're probably now talking about that sort of lower mid-table Premier League sort of as their kind of ceiling, unless they really develop better than expected.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other 5 that I've got in my sort of top 10 that I've kind of pitching is Jedi Gassama, Kellen Fisher, Harrison Armstrong, Ash Phillips, and Matteo Joseph. I don't know if there's anybody, on your notes that you would kind of add to that. There's obviously Freddie Potts in the mix as well.
Yeah, I think I want to put Freddie Potts in the mix because I think he definitely stands out to me. I think he's a player who has got the profile to go far. I think the thing counting against him is his age. I think he does need to really make the step now from bottom half of the Championship to a proper top team playing week in, week out at the top of the Championship, because I want to see what that upper level of his game looks like. We know he can stand out in sort of I don't want to say less talented team, but that's kind of what I mean. And
Sure.
I want to see how he adapts to more pressure, more expectation, and more demands to win. Because I don't think we've really seen him mixing it at the top of a division. So I do want to see a bit more from Potts, but I want him in the conversation. The other one for me is Tom Fellows. We talked about him at the end there and the limitations in his game. But also, I think because of the profile of player we're talking about, he's somebody who, if he gets it right, could be a very, very effective player. And if we were talking about, for example, United get promoted this season, which of these players do you want on your list of players to sign? Tom Fellows is quite high on that list because I think he's got a real effectiveness about him that could make a difference. So I definitely want him to be in the conversation.
If you've started Kiefer Moore, then he'd be perfect.
He suddenly becomes in. The one though I would question, Gab, and this isn't a slight on him at all, but I think Mateo Joseph has gone down in my estimation over the season rather than up. I think I had really high expectations on him in the summer. And I actually think, and I don't mean this in a rude way, but in this Leeds team, in this version of the Championship, I think to only have got, I think it's 3 goals, despite having played more than 1,000 minutes, I think there's a real question there of how he's not been more effective. And I think there's a lot of development for him. I think you're right, he has a really high ceiling. But I actually think of the players we've talked about, his floor is arguably down there with the others, because I do think there's a lot of work for him to do to get it right.
That's a very valid point, actually, because if we look at this Leeds team being easily the most creative side in the Championship over the course of the season, as well as comfortably the best in terms of outfield, then you would argue that why is it
starting centre forward? I mean, I think he's only got something like 5.1, 5.2 XG, and even that feels impressive in a Leeds team that are a creative machine. He's not even really having the chances to score. And that, to me, asks questions about his movement, maybe his sort of the way that he is predicting where the ball's going to go, how he's going to go forward. I want to see more from him before I'd really want to commit to him as a big part of this top 10.
But then is there an argument that he facilitates the team, that his movement is very selfless, that he drags defenders away, so he might not be in the goal-scoring position, but he creates openings for other players to find goal-scoring areas, possibly?
Definitely part of it, and I think obviously that's going to be a really key role, but I think in terms of the effectiveness of that player, I don't think the ceiling for the player whose movement is unselfish and creates for others really takes you to the top of the game at this stage. I think his creative stats, 3 assists,
What about Firmino, though, Ollie? Firmino's had a career with Liverpool being very selfless forward, not necessarily making runs to create space to facilitate goals for those around him.
He did. Lovely footballer, great player. I would argue bigger goal threat than we've seen from Joseph so far. I think it's still, there is a role for that player. You can do that and be brilliant, but you've also got to score yourself. I think if we were talking about a Joseph who'd got, say, 7 goals this season, I'm not asking for game-changing numbers, didn't need 25, but if you do that role, you've still got to be able to chip in. And, that was the big thing that Scott said as we spoke to him, is he misses the big chances when they come. He's not taking the opportunities. Whereas Firmino did all of that sort of off-the-ball work. And then when a chance came to him, he smacked it in the bottom corner. It's that kind of difference of you've still got to have that finisher. You've still got to have that instinct that I've just not quite seen from him.
Yeah, that's fair. But then there's also part of me thinking if we'd put somebody like Tom Fellows in there, who I think he's probably got a ceiling, like maybe, in the Premier League, he might do it for a bottom 6 team that plays a 4-4-2, but or something that's a bit more of a throwback strategy that manages to finish sort of, manages to stay up kind of thing. But I'm not sure that he's really going to make it higher up. Whereas I look at somebody like Mateo Joseph, work ethic, pace, link up play, very selfless, and he's also got pedigree with Spain, representing Spain at youth level as well. So on the basis of potential, you could argue.
Go on, I'll let you have him. Okay. But he's going at 10.
Okay, all right. We can do a deal there.
You'll win me round on his whole pedigree argument of his absolute ceiling being high, but he's going at 10.
Okay, I'll give you Freddie Potts at 9 then.
Freddie Potts at 9, Mateo Joseph at 10, and I think we're there.
Okay, all right. Well, I think JD Kasama and Kellen Fisher and maybe Ash Phillips of Stoke probably come
Yeah,
into that.
I think so. Ash Phillips, I know we've not had enough time to focus on him, but yeah, he's unfortunate that he's having to play for this Stoke team. I think that's the best way of describing it.
Brilliant stuff. All right, well, thanks so much for your time, Ollie, this afternoon. Really appreciate you joining us. Thanks to all our guests who have contributed those video verdicts. Let me know in the comments what you think, who you think the best talents in the Championship are. Also, subscribe to EFL Debate on YouTube and for us on Spotify. And we'll see you again for another Championship podcast next week.